Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the people and the colleagues in my network. So these are great leads to get to those books that have contributed a lot, the most to who they are, leaders, workers, fathers, daughters, sons, whatever it may be, books that have left an impact on how they make their way through business, life, and work. And the three types of books I'll be covering in the series are the first one, a book they'll be covering with me that I've never read before, a book that we've both read, whether specifically for this series or that we've read previously separately. And then the final one where it's either the artist, the author, or the publisher of the book, just to see what the message is of the book that they've put out there in the world. So in this episode, my guest will share their thoughts and insights on a book that I have not read, have much to learn about, and have previously covered in this series. Before we get into the book, though, let me introduce you to who we're talking about. For this episode, my guest will be Jordan R.N. Brown. Jordan is the lead pastor of OV Church in Norfolk, Virginia. He's been in this position since October and was previously the director of the Urban Renewal Center, a faith-based social justice nonprofit. In addition to this, he's a professor at Wave Leadership College in Virginia Beach, as well as a co-host of the Eye to Eye podcast, shortened for Inspire to Inspire. He resides in Suffolk, Virginia, where he lives with his wife, Michonne, and their dog, Little Bear, Little Bear the puppet. Little Bear the Muppet.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right.
and he's glad to serve as a confrontational peacemaker and conversationalist. So Jordan, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. Glad to
And,
be here.
and was that bear in the background?
Yeah, I was gonna say
He's got some lungs, man.
he does this. He may go into doggy heaven a little early, but no, I'm just kidding.
No, no worries, no worries. So Jordan, I gave a brief overview of your background, what you're up to these days. But why don't you tell us a little more of who you are today? What is it that kind of allows you to move from one of these positions to the next?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm the lead pastor of a church in Norfolk, Virginia. OB Church is short for Ocean View. And the Ocean View section of Norfolk is a really pretty place, kind of hometownish, but it's got a beach attached to it, so it's really cool. The natives there are beautiful people. I've only been in the position since October, and since that time, I've really gotten the chance to know them, and they getting the chance to know me and just really loving it. But yeah, I've had my hand in a lot of different deals over the years, and it's been kind of cool to see what's happened in the past 2 years specifically. I've had the opportunity to do multiple things. I was able to run a nonprofit that was faith-based, but really more focused on civil rights and community action. And then also, obviously, still having the opportunity to teach at a college, really working on developing the accountability that is needed to instill knowledge into future individuals that are going to go forth and lead in whatever capacity. And then yeah, just the opportunity to speak my mind is you get to speak your mind on on a show like this, where we try to figure it out or just continue to learn and get information, so that we can make the best decisions, develop critical thinking, habits and patterns, and even just discuss philosophy. It's just really cool to be engaged in all of those different worlds. And so I really do. I think I'm all the fuller for it, and really, hopefully, I'm looking forward to being able to do even more down the road.
So what is it from your past that's led you to where you are now? And I know that's a loaded question, but I'm about the loaded questions. Specifically, I'm always curious, what is it from your past where you kind of, if you could trace it back, first kind of planted the seeds for the work you're doing, whether it was, education, whether it's family, somebody in your family doing something similar. What is it that kind of put you on the path to do all these things?
Yeah, that's it's loaded, but it's pretty easy. I would hope that for most folks that could be simple. So I came up in a household where my father was a pastor, and thankfully he was also still a father too. If you can kind of differentiate between the two, because a lot of folks say that they had a pastor in the home, and they kind of felt that leaned on them a little heavy. But no, my pops was my pops. When I got home, he was dad. He was helping me with math homework. He was fooled and just kind of acted up with us. We had a good time with him. Like he was the dad you weren't ashamed to go out to the movies with when you were in high school, instead of just getting dropped off like you hope you would, so you could holler at some young thing or something like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it was cool to witness him operate in such a way that I got the opportunity and really the privilege to just witness him kind of flesh out his faith as he continued to grow, and being a pastor, and just being hit by things that happen in life, or just really trying to configure, like, even one of his best friends that he grew up with defected from the faith and actually became Buddhist, and ended up dying of an asthma attack. And so I kind of watched him navigate through that as well. You want your people to be a part of your fold if that's what you believe. And even just watching countless loved ones that we've had go on and pass away, and just how do you navigate that when you're responsible for being able to eulogize that? Like, some people really can't handle those things, or they aren't trained or prepared to in such a way. But witnessing that, and then if I can be perfectly honest with you, witnessing him and how he handled the throes of the church. There were a lot of different things that he had to deal with, specifically as a district superintendent, which is a big part of their denomination, where he was more so the oversight of, I think, about 50, 52 churches at any given point in time.
Wow.
So when, and I guess we can just go ahead and start that conversation now, someone succumbed to moral failure, or police had to get involved, or things were just a little too crazy, he was responsible for handling that. And, so I got a good glimpse early on of the fact that being a pastor isn't always the sunshine and lollipops that people really think that it is, or that, the understanding in the 30s, 40s, 50s, being a pastor in the United States was one of the top 5 greatest jobs you can have. Now it's one of the top 5 most stressful, and many people, get burnt out, defect, succumb to health issues, or just give up on the faith altogether. So, knowing that that was a part of the process was something that thankfully did not deter me. As a matter of fact, it more so equipped me to help me to realize that, much like our Bible, um, life happens, and
Yeah, absolutely.
you've gotta be able, at least, to be able to process, in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And thankfully, I think that's exactly what the faith is for.
So
Now, oh, sorry.
no, 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 go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to really. I know you can compress a whole lifetime of stuff here,
No, no, go
but
for it.
yeah, but I really do. I think it's cool. From the academic standpoint, though, that and even the podcast, both became a framework that I did not know that I wanted and craved in my life. If you'd asked me 15 years ago, or told me that I was going to be a professor in anybody's college, I would have busted out laughing in your face, and done so very, very hard. Just that just was not my move.
Yeah,
I've never really wanted to be an educator per se. But then, as I began to, oh, there he is trying to get the last word. Sorry about that.
no worries.
But as things did continue to flesh out, one of the things that I noticed was that there was a carelessness in how the faith was being presented to many different individuals. And if this is what we say it is, then we cannot be flippant about that. And so it put me in a position where I realized, if I'm going to hold people accountable, I must first be accountable, and then it would be a really good idea also to be able to raise people up, kind of steward the hearts and minds of those who will be future Christian leaders, or they don't even have to be pastors or ministers necessarily. But I do want to make sure that they understand the ethic that is really attached to Christianity and what we're really responsible and called to do.
So when you went into your education, was it um a religious education? Was it non-religious? What was that path that you took to prepare for that, aside from witnessing what your father was experiencing, not just his pastorship responsibilities, but also more of an extension into the community? I see, just in reading your bio, seeing what you're about, having spoken to you in the past, I see very much that, where you come from in terms of just seeing that his impact on you. So was the education from the get-go, college or anything like that? Was it right down the path from the very beginning?
Actually, no. When I first got started, my undergrad degree ended up being in mass communications.
Okay.
which was cool because it taught me how to run my mouth and but do so in a correct manner.
Yeah.
However, I'm going to say that my education across the board, which really did not manifest in any way, shape, form, or fashion from a Christian standpoint until much later on, about 7 years after I graduated, I got a lot of I don't know, we'll just say interface before that, and being able to do things like you think it's kind of random and odd to say, but one of the best things I think I ever did to help me in pastoral ministry was work for 2.5 years at TGI Fridays. Because it yeah, yeah,
I
exactly.
don't think no. Like, you probably think my reaction is like, "Oh my god, no, what? How does that make sense?" But I've learned that even if it looks random, while you're doing it, or even if you look back, there's a
Yeah,
purpose that every step, every position, everything. Even when I was like a pizza delivery boy in college, like, even when I was a factory worker, even when I worked in a hotel housekeeping department, those
mhm,
first few jobs are what crafted who I am now.
yeah.
So I love the randomness of it, and I love that you can find the lessons in that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And the reason why that was probably the greatest experience for me was because that was the first time that I really learned how to serve people. Pun, no pun, and however
Yeah, yeah,
intended,
yeah.
that's up to you. But
Makes
then also
sense.
just the ability to develop relationship was one of the things that I did there as well. So I got pretty good at the game, waiting tables, and so eventually being able to take people's orders and get things done, do my side work and stuff, that became old hat. But what happened was I was able to develop these relationships with folks that became my regulars per se, and they would always come in. I would know what they want to eat. I know what they want to drink. I know how they wanted it. And so the service piece was there. And I always did it so well. I believe that, for me, it was my little business. I owned it. And so even to the point that, and this is why I got real good at it, I told myself that if I messed up, that I was going to pay for it out of pocket for that day. And I wasn't trying to
I
lose
love
no
that.
money.
I
Nobody's going
love
to try to lose me. Yeah,
I love that commitment to it,
yeah.
that ownership.
And yeah, it did. And like I said, it really did pay off. And so I really had the time to really just talk to these people. And it was cool because talking to these people gave me relationships, some of them that I still have to this day. And that was back in like 2004, 2005, 2006. So it's awesome to me to see that I was able to sustain those. And really, as we grew, some of these folks, they started asking me questions about faith. And it wasn't something I was intentionally doing. I wasn't a gospel track rat, like some folks are the habit of doing, and I don't say that in a bad way. I think it's necessary, but I think when it comes to really kind of developing relationships with people, that should serve its purpose first. And as you get to know them and really get into their world, and they become more trusting, and you become more trusting of them, then those conversations be on the table.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was amazing to me that I did that, and then finally when I realized that I needed to not run from callings and things of that nature. I was a youth leader. I wouldn't even say pastor at the time in my dad's old church for about 8 years. The first 4 years we don't need to discuss. I wasn't really trying to do it, but when I finally kind of got my grips, I just I wanted to make sure that I was doing things right and was honoring. And so that was another education process because that was the first time I really was getting in my word and studying it, not even really knowing what I was doing, but just studying it. And just getting everything that I could out of it because I had to make these devotionals for these kids that I was taking care of. And I mean, for what it was worth, it was working. It was really, really cool to kind of see our group grow, and we were doing mission, and for the most part, the kids were doing good in school and behaving and not acting crazy. That's always a testament. Crazy kids.
Yeah,
uh,
that's a
yeah,
threshold, yeah.
yeah,
It's a litmus
exactly,
test. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And then finally, I knew that formal education, was going to have to be a part of my move, and so I did go and work on a master's degree. I went to Regent University in Virginia Beach, and I do love and appreciate them. But I think also that I put myself in a category there that allowed me to learn differently than I probably would have had I gone a normal track. I did interdisciplinary, which meant I could pretty much learn or take whatever classes I wanted to take as my core curriculum. And ironically enough, I never thought that I would do it in this capacity. I always loved sports and stuff, but I got into coaching. And so coaching is something that I never realized could be such a powerful ministry tool. Even when you're not doing it for the sake of or the purposes of ministry. And so with that, I got I learned all the things you need to learn. I took Greek and Hebrew and about lost my mind doing that as well. And funny enough, the things that drove you crazy are the things that you probably can't live without now. So doing that,
Amen. Amen.
yeah, and Bible study interpretation, which is also called hermeneutics. I'm actually a professor for that right now, specifically. All those things it's funny the skill sets that you develop as you move along. But specifically, just going back to the coaching for 1 minute, I
Sure.
really love being able to get individuals to realize the type of agency that they have. I'm not going to give them a directive. I usually do a lot of question asking
Yeah.
to kind of help them to think through the process so that they can get there. And then if I have some resource for them, then I'll offer them that. But yeah, it's really cool to see how I was given the agency to help people get the agency. And so of course that also applies from biblical standpoints and perspective as well. I don't want to just tell them something. I want them to be able to find it for themselves. I want them to be able to ask the right questions. I want them to be able to unpack, or let's use the really unpopular word, deconstruct, so that they can reconstruct in the proper manner and ever so gently, but yet still ever so powerfully be able to get deeper relationships and get further rooted into their faith.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I think, like my religious background, I went to a Catholic school as a kid, and I think that's why I didn't stick with a religion. I still respect it. I'm still like a very spiritual person. I still go back to that. I don't know, I still have this conversation with God, but I think that's why I didn't stick tightly to it as I could have, because as you said, a lot of the messaging is this is the messaging. Like this is what it is. You're just receiving it and that's it. Where what you're telling me is there are those messages, you learn them, the ins and outs, but how do you make it relate to the people that you're teaching, that you're coaching? So I think that was the disconnect for me, was just it was so one directional. And there wasn't kind of that, there really wasn't when I was growing up, there really wasn't that association between what the messages mean and how it could apply to my life, how I could use it going forward. And I think it would have helped a lot if I kind of had that translation. So I just noticed that just based on what you're telling me,
mhm.
the value of what that is, because you're really connecting it to what people in some of these cases, kids, which is so important, what they're living, what they're going through.
Yeah, yeah, it's all about application, and then even with the application, there are implications for each
Yes.
application. So it's not one size fits all. It never has been, it never will be. And that's one of the big pieces that gets me in the cookie cutter complexes of things like, I'm just going to say words, white evangelicalism, or even the black church, where there's just a preset understanding that you have to fold yourself into these and be a part of these, because if not, then you can't be a part of these. So it's highly exclusive. And to be honest with you, I'm going to be fair. There is an exclusivity about the faith, but there's also a huge inclusivity concerning that exclusivity. Paul says it this way. I was like all. So that I could save some. To the Jew, I became like the Jew, one who was in the law, one who was not in the law, and then to the weak. It's about being all things to all people,
Yes.
because
Yes.
there's no relative us for and no more categorization in the faith, but a lot of our denominations or even non-denominational constructs have led us to this point that we must believe that in order to be this type of Christian, you must do this, you must listen to this music, you must be a part of this group, you must vote this way, and all of that. If you take a look at the Bible, you realize it's just dead wrong. And so I want folks to realize, and even you, John, in this conversation, from hearing what you're saying, that there is a huge misplaced or there's a malpractice in the understanding of how the faith is being taught, not just here in the West, but definitely here in the United States of America. There's a miscalculated perspective that is not including the global understanding of what the faith is, or what traditional Eastern, excuse me, or even Orthodox ways of the faith that have a profound impact on how we should be approaching our love for God, our love for man, the way that we serve in this world, the mindset that we have, which would be the mindset of Christ. All of these things apply, but you genuinely have to give yourself the opportunity to do a comprehensive overview of the Bible, to get what to not what we call cherry pick, which is what a lot of churches do, where they only focus on these 10, 15 verses every single year. And then you don't get the exposure that you need to while going through the narrative in the Old Testament, how it presets everything for the New Testament, how it introduces you to Jesus, how it puts you in place to witness exactly why he was so accepted and rejected, and then to understand ultimately the purpose of the gospel, exactly why he was able to die on the cross, and everything that that means. And then when he raised from the dead, when he goes into heaven, and what does that mean when it establishes his lordship, which is the most unpopular part for your average everyday Christian, because we don't have a problem with him being savior. God
Mhm.
bless you for saving us, but please don't tell me how to live my life, and that's lordship. And so there are some really there's some unpopular things for us here, and I have no problem admitting that. But at the same time, when someone saved your life, why would you not try and do everything you can to simply say thank you, which is exactly what living our life is supposed to look like as Christians.
Mhm.
So I'll stop there for now because I'm sure there's more that we can unpack. But
No, and what I was gonna say is just, I love what you're saying about just, you have your specialization, but I love that you state that, I gotta learn about everything around me, and I'm assuming it also helps you teach teach and guide from what your lessons are. But I think it's those conversations. You know what I mean? You and I were talking right before we started recording this, where you have your own podcast as well, and you love diving into those conversations, learning about people, inspiring people, just the main reason I started this was because I saw during the pandemic that, we don't really talk to each other. I think because we didn't know what the hell was going on with the pandemic, people were
right,
being more honest, they were being more open, they were being more vulnerable. Um, and I thought it was amazing. You really one of the lessons I put out there was, and it wasn't to be morbid or morose or a downer, but it's like, this is the as close to the end of the world as we've experienced, like the people that are on this call, like this generation, if you will. What do we want to learn? What do we want to put out there? What do we want to share? Because we hold back so much. So the power of conversations is just huge. And as you said, there's a lot of it that the way I learned it, um, when I was growing up was very just like you said, the same 10 or 15 kind of verses or lessons, and that was it. To me, it was just very cookie cutter, like it was very scripted, where I would have appreciated that kind of application, as you've noted, to my life, or my life as a 6, 7, 8 year old. You haven't lived, kid. These are the kind of things that these are the kind of things
yeah, yeah,
these are the
yeah.
kind of lessons that can help you be prepared for what's coming down the road. But I love the fact that you infuse those conversations to apply it. And I've said that ad nauseum in the last couple minutes, but I just think that's very valuable.
Good. Yeah, thank you, brother. I don't know. I think that you're talking about 2020, 2021. Good God, because we all want to talk about that. Uh, but yeah, I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. I think that what you're saying and really kind of the undertone in it about people not talking to each other. I think that that is one of the real reasons that faith is misclassified, because of the level of assumption that's developed based off of how do I do this? Okay, so let me ask you a question. So if I were to ask you, especially since you've never actually fully read the Bible, if I were to, yeah, I know, Little Bear, thank you, sir. If I were to ask you, since you've never fully read the Bible, what you would think the content of the Bible is in accordance with everything that you hear Christians or other evangelicals or leaders or people say in society today, what would you suppose is actually in the Bible, and like to what extent, what percentage?
I mean, yeah, the extent to what I know, just this kind of and listen, I'm simplifying it here. It's not out of disrespect.
No,
It's
you're
not
good.
taking
You're good.
anything away from that,
No,
right?
it's a good,
It
honest question,
To
brother.
me,
I'm
it's
not.
just kind
Yeah.
of like before and after Jesus. Um, Not strictly closely to his life. It goes way before. It starts way before that, and it ends further past that. But no, I mean, I couldn't break down for you what is in, depending on the version or whatever, what the breakdown is, what it's all about. I couldn't tell you.
Okay, cool. No, not a problem at all. And that's perfectly fine because I figured that you're good, you're an honest man, and you got some wisdom about yourself. So I knew that the
I
answer you would
try.
give me would be fine. But I'm gonna tell you this.
But I
So
mean, let's just say this is the book you want to discuss today, right?
oh
The
yeah, of course,
Bible. Okay.
100%, and
Okay.
I
Okay.
love it, and I
Okay.
love it, I love it, I love it. But no,
I
no.
just wanted to
So
clarify for anybody listening that we didn't introduce it as this is what we're going to talk about, but that's what
yeah,
we're going to talk about.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So let me give you a faith and culture answer. That I would say, if I was somebody who never read the Bible before, and was listening to all these people who say that they are professed Bible, Jesus believing folks, that they are Christians or followers of the way, however you want to call it. If I was just to listen to everything that these people are talking about, I would automatically assume that the Bible is mainly filled with something concerning abortion and something concerning staying away from people that are Marxists, and Marxism isn't even in the Bible. I would probably say that capitalism is in the Bible, and only capitalism, and that anything other than that is demonic. Uh, I would say so. So you're picking up on the vibe here, and so
Oh yeah, I
yeah, and
going to
that's
going to that next level of what the perception is I get from what people say, like I get a lot of judgment.
yeah, exactly. It's all about judging your neighbor, not loving your neighbor. So
Yes.
yeah, so and the percentages of that are really high. And that's why the stakes of why we need to understand the Bible and what it's really saying are even higher. I'm going to say something that would be heretical and almost controversial in some camps. But just to give you the example, if you were looking in the Bible for something pertaining to, we'll say directly pertaining to abortion, you're not going to find it. Now, here's the deal. I am definitely anti-abortion. I
Mhm.
am pro-life, but I'm also womb to tomb pro-life. So vitality across the board from when you're born to when you die. And also for making sure that those people who are considering having abortions, which almost 100% of the time is financially motivated, as in they can't afford to raise a child. So to put parameters in place to make sure that those people have support,
Mhm.
then we can have a conversation about, that. But okay, so back to the objective question again, abortion. Zero times in the Bible do you see anything directly addressing abortion. But there is one passage in the Bible that is one of the 613 laws that you find in either Leviticus or Deuteronomy. I think it's Leviticus, um, where if two men are fighting and they accidentally hit a pregnant woman and then she loses the child, that's the closest that you're going to get. And then there's some recompense to that for the person who's responsible. But yeah, you're not going to see anything else. You're really not. So it's one of those things. And what this really does is that this begins begging questions like, when did this conversation become attached to the faith in such a way that it makes this grandstand appearance across our entire nation? And that's when the waters get murky, man, because then you have to start looking at not even church history, but you can kind of look at our societal history, especially over the past 70 years, and you realize that political agendas got involved. And make no mistake, the Bible is a political book because Jesus is king. And that was their version of our president today. But he reigns eternal. But it wasn't about politics. It is just a political book. And not only that, but let me take it a step further. There is nothing about partisanship in our Bible. And then specific partisanship about being a part of a certain party in order to belong to the faith. These are things that are represented in our culture, and they're dead wrong. And they have
Yeah.
nothing to do with our Bible. And so we just got to get folks to understand that, because the misclassification is the thing that becomes so damning. It's that attaches itself to all of these things, and then the fear mongering. And I'll give you one verse of 2 Timothy 1:7. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power and love and a sound mind. Or First John, that talks about how a perfect love casts out fear. And then you attach that to the two greatest commandments that we have from the Bible, which is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And then Jesus is very specific about who our neighbor is, and it's everybody, right down to the last, the lost, and the least, or the people that you would want nothing to do with. So that's why this is an awkward conversation, because if believers really began to attach themselves to the principles and the teachings that are really in the Bible, then we probably wouldn't be having half the conversations that we have here. Like, why are so many people defecting from the Christian faith in the United States of America? And then in parentheses, I'd say, while growing immensely all across the world. Like, we're
Yeah.
the ones that are losing thousands by the day. They're adding thousands by the day. And you got to start asking these questions so you can get the answers.
Yeah, and the thing is, I haven't gotten around to reading it. Honestly, it's not on my everyday radar, but it has been in the periphery just because I know that um, a lot of it gets hijacked.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
the like anything else, there's the true intent behind it, a book, a message, a political campaign, somebody's message, somebody's podcast. There's the original intent, but then there's the perception. There's the perception that people take away from it. And then on top of that, which is kind of it can be subconscious, right? It just happens automatically. But then there's
Mhm.
like the intentional hijacking that people respect this book, people respect this campaign. So I'm going to use it to say, okay, I have the right to claim that this book, or I'm a believer in that, whatever it may be. I'm not even just talking about the Bible, but I know better than to just go by what people are saying about something, what people are claiming about something.
Mhm.
I think that gets lost in today's society where you hear somebody saying, "Don't go over here, don't listen to this person, or else this is what's going to happen." And people are like, "Oh, thank you very much." And then they don't pay attention, they don't listen, they want to cancel or whatever. So when people have said that about the Bible, I'm going by what I've heard, but my image of it from when I was a kid hasn't. Again, I don't know it that well, but, those teachings that I had as a kid in Catholic school made me who I am. You know, love thy neighbor. I mean, full stop. Just respect the person next to you. So those are like the foundation of who I am. So I got to get back to reading it and really understanding it. But it's amazing how people hijack certain whatever it may be, item or message to whatever narrative they want to craft to instill fear in others. So I say that people are hijacking it. I say that people are saying it's about judgment, but I'm just going by what I hear. I'm telling you what I hear out there, what I see, but I don't believe it about it. I just need to get around to reading it myself.
Yeah, no, completely understand that. And you're one of many. Statistics are they're a little bleak. Is the average? Well, I'll just give you believers. So the average Christian in America, of all of them, there's a group called Barna that does statistics, Christian statistics only, and they're amazing, and I love them. Only 22%. I think these are measures from 2020. I don't know what the update is, but about
Sure, sure,
22,
sure.
yeah, 22% of uh, of of Christians actually consistently read their Bible on a weekly basis. I don't know how many times a week. It just verifies that it's 22% multiple times a week. 30% don't read it at all. And of those 30, they fold into 60% who say that they read it 4 times a year or less. And so, it begins to that begins to paint the picture that answers the questions that I began begging as to why we don't understand and why we do things that are technically not biblical and not Christian. Why there doesn't seem to be love for our neighbor. And so, I could go down a million rabbit trails in that, but I'm going to keep it simple because I don't know who really here is a biblical, not scholar necessarily, but somebody who just reads the Bible enough to understand it.
Yeah.
But I will say this, to your point, one of the key pieces that I think we all would really do well to pay attention to is again, it's that whole why behind the what piece. But with intentionality, I want to kind of veer it into this one specific direction. So, if we are to say that your upbringing is responsible for producing you, And that no matter what percentage of that was your school upbringing, which was Catholic school, which was everything that they taught you from that standpoint, which was highly doctrinal because Catholicism is. There's a lot of things that Catholics do that really aren't in the Bible. It doesn't
Yep.
mean that they're not believers. It just means that, in my personal opinion, they are definitely still Christians. They just kind of have a fringe understanding of certain things, which that's going to be just about every denomination to a certain extent. But, I'm not doing a Hail Mary to get to Jesus.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I, I believe I can just go directly to Jesus myself.
Yeah.
um, but I mean, that's just the example.
No, I know. I know.
That's what they want to do. That works for them. That's cool.
Yeah.
But I want to. I almost feel like I'm being a vetted historian person more than anything. But I want to begin to kind of take a look at these different institutions that have produced our current Christian understandings. And whether that be a private school, whether that be a homeschool, whether that be all of these other things, there are materials that are deemably Christian that have these really kind of ill-fated thoughts on certain individuals throughout history. Um, and when you begin to see that this is what they teach certain youth, it's not too difficult to begin to fathom why in 2020 and 2021, a lot of Christians and churches started to think, hey, there's something to this Q thing. Let me check this out, and then become really good believers. So let me name some names. So there are teaching curriculums for homeschool and private schools from a company named Abeka and another one, BJU, which is short for Bob James University. I mean, not Bob James. I love Bob James. Bob Jones. Bob
Yeah.
James, brilliant keyboardist, brilliant pianist. Love that man. Responsible for a lot of 90s hip hop, whether you believe it or not.
Okay.
Uh,
I'm here
yeah,
for that.
yeah. Puffy did, like, what was it? Hypnotize from Biggie.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
We can have that conversation too.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, so that was Bob James. They sampled him, but Bob Jones University specifically.
Okay.
So they have material that they use, and in it you will see, and I mean, I kid you not, you will see something like Nelson Mandela. Nelson, we know who he was, what he was, responsible for helping to break apartheid. They have him classified in their books as a Marxist, and this is a Christian history book. And so that's how they're teaching some of these folks as they come up. And then, when you're having that glorified conversation on Facebook or Instagram with these individuals, and they're asking you, like, how can you even believe this stuff? Well, it's because we were taught something completely different. And whether it came from a secular society, public school standpoint, or something else isn't really the case for me. The case for me is the fact that they would swear up and down that you should probably not be listening to these people. The whole fear mongering thing we're just having a conversation about, and then, that they try and keep their stuff pure and straight and to the point, but it's not. And not only that, but there's nothing in the Bible that would connotate why you should have that mode of thinking when you're talking about these individuals. If you want to be real honest, one of the things that makes me really grit my teeth the most is taking a look at someone like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, someone who is celebrated year in and year out, has his own holiday. Really is celebrated for what the peacemaker that he was and all of these things. But if you took a look at his material and everything that he did and everything that he said, and you don't even really need to do that, really just begin to ask yourself questions. Number one, why do we celebrate him as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? When I lived in Atlanta, and wherever I went, he was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was known as a Baptist preacher, pastor, minister first, then a civil rights activist. We only notify him and address him as a civil rights activist in society more than anything else. But then you can ask this question: why did they kill him? Like, seriously, why did they kill him? Why did they? And this is how you can tell that there's nothing new under the sun. Why did they label him a communist sympathizer? You know what I'm saying? Because you can't be a Christian and a communist, not in their world, not in their eyes. That just doesn't make any sense. And then that kind of goes on. Let me just rabbit trail it from here, from that time specifically. Then it begins to make sense why people had issue when it came to the understanding of what the Cold War. or dealing with China. Why? Because both of them were communist parties, but the underbelly of that conversation was that they were anti-God. Okay. If they were not anti-God, it would be different. So I always ask counterfactual questions who to people who really always want to get on my nerves about stuff like this. And the easiest question that I ask is, so let's have a real conversation. Let's just say that China or Russia, we're at war with them or we're at odds with them. I bet that, not even a question, just more so a statement. I bet that if they were a capitalist nation, that communism wouldn't look so bad on our end. And then I just let them think about that. Because
Yeah.
really what happens either that or they're just gonna have to finally admit, "Oh, okay." Or like everything that's going on right now with Russia and Ukraine. There are some people in the United States of America right now who are okay with Putin because he's a quote unquote Christian, but look at what he's doing to his brethren. And not only
Yeah.
that, but he's treating it like as a holy war because he's trying to say that their family, like they're their children, they speak the same language, and so they're our brothers, so they should belong to us. And so that means you bomb them. But he's celebrated now because he's turned Russia from a communist nation into a Christian society, quote unquote. So, I just
Yeah.
it's one of those things. And again, this is me accessing my understanding of my Bible and all of the practical application and the implications. And every time that I look in it, I go through it. And what I find is anytime that you see something like what they're doing, it is antithetical to things like Galatians 5:22 and 23, also known as the fruits of the Spirit, the love, the joy, the peace, the patience, the faithfulness, the goodness, the gentleness, the kindness, the self-control. And then the last two specifically, actually, gentleness and self-control are the last two. They are split apart in a verse all by themselves. And I think that that is not a coincidence
Yeah. Yeah.
because we don't have gentleness. And rarely do I ever see people nowadays, especially in front of a camera, exercise some kind of self control. And that doesn't have to just be with their body. This is things that come out of their mouths. You know what I'm saying? But they would all swear that they abide by the guidelines of this amazing Christian text. And so I have a problem with that because, again, it's all about the misrepresentation of what is really a very beautiful faith.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's just so much of what goes south in society is driven by most often it's not even you believe that, I believe this. Yours is different from mine, or we look different. It's more that because you're different, you may somehow replace what I believe, replace who I am, take me out. Do you know what I mean? Like whether
mhm,
metaphorically, literally, whatever. But it's just amazing how much fear drives so much of what we're suffering through.
mhm,
Um, and it really like you've seen with everything in Russia. It's kind of like they weren't attacked at a high level, right? Because people will say, "Oh, well, that's what you believe over here," blah 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 blah. But at a high level, yeah, Ukraine was attacked. And like you said, Putin is saying he's doing it because of this, because of that. Like it's amazing how many politicians or like the work of most politicians. Um, maybe I'm going to put my foot in my mouth, is driven by I can deliver you from what you're scared of. It's
no,
amazing how much everything in society, most everything is driven by staying away from that which we fear.
mhm.
Um,
And
yeah, I mean,
again,
as you were go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, and again, that's the entire point that
Yeah.
is the misrepresentation is the fact that oh no god so yeah I go on tangents on Facebook from time to time and my comment section can and will look like a dumpster fire,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with that because I really want to get a gauge on what people are genuinely thinking. Now they know you ain't gonna disrespect, don't disrespect people in my comments.
Yeah. Yeah, I
um
mean, and that stuff I don't like only because it's amazing what happens when you sit somebody down one on one, face to
mhm,
face,
mhm,
one to one, right?
yeah,
Um, but on Facebook, everybody's like a keyboard warrior saying whatever they're feeling, not you, but the people that may, create that dumpster fire. But it's
yeah,
amazing how people are fired up online that if they just sat down, which is impossible because they're talking to each other from across the country in most cases or whatever in different
right,
countries. But it's amazing what would happen if people sat down face to face and really had a conversation. But it's mind-blowing how much they have that audience. They have your followers as a captive audience if they want to pay attention to what they're going to espouse, what they're going to spew, whatever it may be. But it's just such a waste of time, because if they sat down with each other, spoke to each other, understand what each other wanted, not wanted, needed. I always look at it as
Hmm.
mediation.
Yeah.
There's what you really, the basis of what you need, and there's like the ego and the want.
Right.
They'd
Right.
realize that they have, like, similar backgrounds, but it's just the online stuff just amplifies. We're always looking for a fight. We're just primal. We're always looking to fight against something. It's just built
Yeah.
in our
I'm not.
nature.
Nah, I
No, I
feel
know,
you.
I know, but
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that part too, because that's another piece that I appreciate about the Bible is just the unity and diversity of it. Especially in the Gospels, the story about Jesus. You have four different stories or different vantage points, and they all tell something different about the exact same account. And none of them are wrong, but some of them are different. Certain pieces need to be reconciled. But I think that is one of the things that we completely miss about how we are supposed to operate in community in our society, which is exactly what you're speaking to. That's why I kind of laugh when they talk about Facebook groups or Facebook communities, because I'm like, ain't no community here. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but in the same light and at the same token, that was one of the reasons I was now I'll touch that later. I'll address this now. It's just that, you know, much of what we have had conversations about, when you do take that opportunity to apply that to a place or a space that's virtual or meta or whatever the case may be, people feel like meta
Meta.
is the next community. I'm just like, well, we're gonna miss out on
Just
a whole lot, and there's gonna be a lot of misunderstanding and misinterpretation,
get in
and that
front of each other, talk to
right.
each other. That's what's missing, is really just we don't I do a lot of work with, like, college students,
Hmm.
graduate students as well. And you'll see maybe on social media, not Facebook, because I kind of stay off of that stuff, but more like LinkedIn, just kind of
Yeah.
just the power of conversation. Not just the hi, not just the buy, not just the liking something, not just the sharing that of whatever somebody's doing, but actually talking to somebody. And Jordan, this goes back to the lesson that I really learned during the pandemic, is just you have, like, the highs and buys, how you doing? Then you have, how you doing? How's everything going? Where we just kind of repeat the facts of our day. And then there's like, okay, how are you really doing? What
Hmm.
do you really need? What
Hmm.
can I provide for you? Like, what can I empower you with, engage you with? And that's just that we're just not taught that. And I bring up the students just because, students mostly, I'm generalizing, but it's mostly the curriculum. Make the
Right.
grades, move forward, but rarely is it ever, okay, now this class is going to be about talking to each other. This class is going to be about, they do have debate classes, but really understanding each other's differences in this safe environment. No one's going to come to swings, but we're going to realize that people are different, and that hopefully we get you to the point where you realize that those differences are valuable, because they teach you
Right.
where your boundaries are, where you can improve. But it's just the power of conversation that just kind of gets lost. And I mean, I seek those out with this series. So, and I'm learning a lot from this conversation with you right now.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate it. And you're right, man. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. We all have full clarity in certain areas. We all have blind spots. And the only way that we can figure that out is to make sure that we have other people in our world that intentionally and specifically are not like us. I appreciate my environments, especially right now. My new church is, I mean, it's very white, but there's an understanding behind that. It's a bit of an experiment. We would love to be a representation of what our community is. And in OV, the community is about 64% Caucasian, about 32% African American, and a couple of people spiced in between. So I would like for us to be a representation of that 32%. We definitely have had some people come in our doors that are people of color since I've been there, and I'm really excited for that. And if we don't get it down to the actual percentage marker by like the red cent, I don't care. That's fine. But
Yeah.
I do want to make a valiant effort to be able to do that, because then it does give us the opportunity to say, hey, these people with these different experiences are coming together, and then there's much that we can appreciate about each other. It's like it's the colorblind conversation, which is another thing that's not biblical either. And it's funny because I do have some people in my congregation that tout color blindness, and I'm like, well, I mean, if you don't see my color, then you don't see not just me, but then you don't see the fact that God created me to be this way. And so we are all created to be celebrated for who we are, what we have, all of our attributes. They all contribute to something, and that something can be good. But yeah, if you're not gonna see someone for who they are in its entirety, then what you're saying is you're dismissing a part of them, because indirectly what you're saying is that part doesn't matter to you, or that part is something that you don't agree with. And it's an uncomfortable way to say it, but it's doggone truth. So you really
Yeah,
just got to call a spade a spade. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Um,
wait, you had mentioned the sections of the Bible. I think you had mentioned 4 sections. Can you one of the questions I ask about whatever book we're covering, but for the Bible, can you kind of break out what the components are just to give us a better idea of what we could find in there?
yeah, sure, absolutely, absolutely. The four sections, actually the four books, make up one section that I was just talking about. That's just
Okay.
the canonical Gospels is what they call that. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. The ones that most people have probably heard of to a certain extent. But yeah, basically all of these pieces are put together in the Old Testament and the New Testament to talk about the life of Jesus and how we get to him, and then how we get through him, and then what happened after him. And then his life specifically in the Gospels is broken down usually by the season of course, I forget the word right now. Absolutely. Obscurity. There you go. So he has a season of obscurity. Nobody really knows who he is. They're getting ready to understand who he is. They're witnessing his miracles. People are asking questions. Some people are curious. Then he has this season of popularity, of course, where everybody is well aware of who he is. They know about the signs, the wonders, the miracles. They're in awe of the teachings and the authority. And then, of course, obviously, there's a season of rejection, and even those who love him scatter, and then those who don't love him are shouting, or even those who did love him one week, the week Holy Week, Palm Sunday is what we will call it, as we're getting ready to enter Easter season. Those same people who were waving palms and shouting Hosanna, the very following week were shouting crucify him. So it's just we're a fickle people, but it's
That's a good way. That's a good way to
yeah,
put it.
yeah, and so, you just have to deal with the context of that, and that's beautiful. But yeah, so even in the beginning, so Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, which is called Torah or the Pentateuch, or just it's the first 5 books of the Bible. The Jewish faith hold fast to those. Because that was Torah, which meant instruction for them. So that was a law. And then there are the historical narrative on the in between with Judges and even Ruth. And so I'm not going to name them all off for you because that would take forever. But then you kind of you roll through that process, and then you get to the understanding of the development of the people in Israel with First and Second Kings, First and Chronicles, which gives the storied account of everything that produced King David and everything that became the Davidic dynasty. And then you also get to witness the downfall and the tearing apart of the nation of Israel, and it tears into 2 separate kingdoms. And the kings that came after David, some of them did okay, but most of them did a really horrible job of upholding the faith. And so, of course, that leads into exile. They become exiled, which they were told in advance by many prophets, please stop doing this or you will be exiled. They don't listen, and then they become exiled. Sound familiar? Um,
Yeah.
but then there's a promise by other major and minor prophets that they will be able to come back and rebuild. And then so they tell stories like what Ezra and Nehemiah, how they begin the process of rebuilding. And even in that, they're still not acting right. And then you have this 400 years of silence called the Inter-Testamental Period. And so that's the time between the Old Testament and the beginning of the markings of the New Testament. And then finally, we have the introduction of the Gospels. And it's funny because the Old Testament, I think, is about 2,000 years worth of material.
Okay.
which people, chronologically never really pay attention to that. When you do, then you realize this all wasn't written by one person. Obviously, it was written by multiple individuals over the span of millennia, which is one of the crazier and more beautiful parts about it for me. Because then it wasn't just one person's ideas, and that this is all is backed by things like not architecture, but excavation. Oh yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, then the four gospels, obviously, and then everything after that, for the most part, is written by like one of two or three people. One is Luke, responsible for Luke Acts. I love Luke because he's not actually a disciple. He may not even actually really be a Jew. He's a physician by nature. And he is more the historian, so he is providing more of the historical accounts. And if we don't have Acts, which he's what he wrote, then we don't have an account for the birthing and the movement of the church, and where it ended up and how it ended up. And we don't have the story of Paul. And so it would make no sense to have the story or not have the story of Paul and then have all of these Pauline epistles, which are the letters that Paul wrote to all these different churches, Romans and First Corinthians and Philippians,
Yep.
Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians, First and Second Thessalonians, and then of course to certain people as well, like his sons of the faith, Timothy and Titus. Or even my personal favorite one, the one page that is Philemon, because it is an epistle, a note, a love letter to set a slave free. So I'll leave that there.
Okay.
And then there are a few other individuals after that. You get a revisit from John. He writes some, and then Jude, Jesus' half brother, James, Jesus' half brother. And then of course the book of Revelations, which is the apocalyptic prophetic visions that John saw and was able to account that ultimately lead to whatever you want to call it, end times theology, tribulation stuff. But it leads to the defining way in which we witness the victory in the end, the grand, the grand battle, the Avengers end game of biblical aspects, if you will. And so it's just beautiful to see how all of those things apply to what ultimately becomes our salvation as Christian believers. And then just all the stuff that's on the in between. So again, this is what would you focus on? The Bible is not filled with abortion. I don't ever want to break it down to brass tacks, but sometimes I find myself doing that, especially when it comes to the other conversation, which is usually the LGBTQIA conversation. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not hardline on stuff like that. The waters are very murky. I do know that, I guess, in the end, God is always judge. We are only called to love people. But I also know that I'm trying really hard to figure out and get down to the bottom of it, what it's really trying to say about that. Because some people will just say, nope, they're condemned, they're dead. And I'm like, there's no way that we can do that, because what do you do with a Christian believer who happens to be a homosexual? And the Bible says in Romans chapter 8, verse 1, that there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. I wrestle with that. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit up here and write anybody off, because you can't write off a murderer. You can't write off a rapist. You can't write off a terrorist. And like, do they deserve penalty and justice? Yes, sure.
Yeah.
But there, and let me just give you all the keys to the kingdom in this one understanding. My dog doesn't want me to do it, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Um, so specifically in Mark, the book of Mark, chapter 3, there's an incident that occurs where some people are trying to accuse Jesus because they're hating, basically, and they say that he is possessed by a demon. And basically, Jesus makes one statement, and this one statement permeates my soul throughout the rest of the text. And it's simply this: uh, concerning sins, there are no unforgivable sins with the exception of one, and it is the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. And the reason why he said that was because they said that he, Jesus, and then this is a Trinity conversation, which if you want to have it, we can, but it's not necessary for now. Jesus being God and also being the Holy Spirit,
Mhm.
they are blaspheming him. And so what they're saying, what he's saying is them saying that he's possessed by a demon is unforgivable. And that is the only unforgivable sin that there is. And so if that's the case, and then we remember what I was talking about in Romans
Yep.
8:1 with no condemnation. Yeah, the waters get really murky with me concerning
Yeah.
stuff like that. And at the end of the day, whatever it is for now, I have to be okay with that. So go ahead. Yeah.
No, I just appreciate what you're saying, where anytime somebody says, "Listen, this is the text or this is the lesson and that's it. That's it. There's no room for gray area. It's black and white." wrong or right, yes or no. So I appreciate the fact that maybe it's not fun for you that you're wrestling with it, whatever the issue may be, if they're various. But I like the fact that you are wrestling with it. You're not just going. You're looking for deeper meaning. You're not letting anybody else interpret it for you.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. As awkward or even as horrible as it feels sometimes, wrestling is the one thing that we're really called to do with this text. And we're going to wrestle with it until the day that we enter into eternity.
Why do
And
you
then we
say
can
that?
get
Why do you say it's the one thing we're meant to do?
it is the one thing. If you are a real believer in this text, then you can't just say, "Oh, I believe in it," and then put it down and walk away. Because if you do, remember, this is what we are claiming to be the very vitality of our lives. This is the one thing that we are supposed to hold fast to. Like, I mean, if you white knuckle in anything in this lifetime, you're white knuckling the understanding of why you exist, and the purpose that comes from your existence, and the call that you get through the purpose that comes from your existence. Like, if you don't have these things, it says, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Yep.
Like, I don't want to live that kind of a wayward life. And I don't want to, definitely, I don't want to live that kind of a wayward life in what I would claim to be my faith. Like, that just doesn't make sense for me, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's not a shade to you or anybody else in particular, because everybody's life is their experience, and so I will never forsake that. But let's just say that you no, so it really isn't. So let me put it this way. Let's just say that you claim to be a go hard Christian. Everything about you, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. All I do is listen to worship music. All I do is, whatever the case may be. But you're one of those people who's a part of the 30% that never opened this thing,
Mm,
or the 60 who only open it 4 times a year. Tell me exactly how much sense that makes.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So what happens is then we have the honor and the privilege of struggle when we get to open up this book and go through its pages, and then begin to try and reconcile certain things for ourselves, but then to trust that God is sovereign and that he's good in the process. And I have to say that because when you read some of these pages in this book, it doesn't seem like it sometimes.
Hmm.
But that's because he meets us where we're at. So when you allow wars, or when you constitute killings, and it seems like it's a direct command from you, you got to ask why he would do something like that, because he wouldn't just do it for the sake of doing it. But so many people just kind of take these terms literally. They don't consider the context. They don't consider any of the real why behind the what. They don't consider the culture of the time. They don't consider the economics of the time. They don't consider the positions of the time, and
Yeah.
they just immediately attach an American view of what's happening in there, and that either they buy into it and just become a literalist, or they don't and they refuse to believe, because how can I believe in a God who blah 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 blah? I got
Yeah.
a friend
Yeah.
who says that all the time on Facebook. Like, why would
Yeah.
you allow this? Why would this happen? Or why would he still allow these things today? I'm like, that is not always the agency of God. He did give us, and this is also a conversation too, because my good friend who's the other pastor at my church, he's a reformed person, which means that he has a certain belief in Christianity, that there are those who are elect, and that's really a conversation I don't want to get into. But the long story less of the elect is that some people were chosen, and they know that they were chosen, and that they're going to be Christian no matter what, which really uh, I can see it when he explains it the right way. So
Yeah.
there's a proper understanding of it, but some people don't explain it that way, and I don't like those people. I love them, I don't like them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. That's a good distinction that you can love somebody, respect their humanity, that they're here, but yeah, not like them.
yeah, yeah. But there's another side of that, where, and it's a lot more philosophical, obviously, that it's the understanding that you and I would both really have about terms of will and volition. And knowing that we were created, but even in that creation, there's decision making. So I'm a middle camper. I do believe that God is fully omniscient. He knows everything. He knows everything we ever did. He knows what we're gonna do. All of those pieces. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to play his hand in moving
Yeah,
that in
yeah,
certain
yeah.
ways. Now, the Bible would reflect that he's done that sometimes. He said it hardens Pharaoh's heart when dealing with
Yeah.
Moses, which also is another conversation, because he didn't. fully hardened Pharaoh's heart, Pharaoh hardened his own heart, and then it got to the point where God was like, "Well, if you're gonna do it, just do it." Um,
Yeah.
but when I look at the text, there's no way that I can just consolidate all of these things into this understanding. Well, God just wanted this to be this way, so it's going to be this way. And not just that, but then think about how man attaches his common notions to these things as well. And then we have what gender issues, and we have all these other issues about roles and expectations that are actually also very wrong as well in the Bible, because there were many women who were leaders and many women who were businesswomen and did all these other different things. But
That's when they're cherry picking what they
cherry
want.
pick is a beautiful thing,
You
right?
know what I mean? And the
Yeah,
way that I've seen it, that brief, relatively brief exposure that I had to any religious teachings, again, Catholic, um, since then, the way I always saw it and the way I always still feel is that there was some kind of creator, but I don't see them as playing chess, making the move. I see it as whatever it is that happened with the beginning of everything, he put things into place and then he kind of stepped back. That's just a vision that I have in my head where we still have that free will. It's like, here's the gift of life, here's the gift of humanity, here's the gift of, your brothers and sisters. What are you guys going to do with it?
yeah. No, I see that. I get
You
that.
know?
Somewhat of a deist concept. Well, I know that's not what you mean.
Yeah, yeah,
Where
yeah.
God just like said it and forget it. Yeah,
And not
so,
quite forget it,
yeah. Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I don't think I don't think
yeah,
that's what you were
yeah.
saying. But I do think that there's some validity to that as well, though. This is just kind of the understanding of the tree. This is in the garden, like
Mhm.
when God first created man and woman, there was nothing for them to really kind of weigh their faith against. It was just them walking with God in the cool of the garden and doing whatever he said. And then this animal, serpent, whatever you want to call it, comes out of nowhere and says that there can be something other than that. And then that's the deception that leads to the fall. And that now we have this other opportunity to kind of meld in everything we were just talking about, and put it together with the common construct of what we will call sanctification. So this is the reason why I do love the Bible, and we get to see the good, the bad, the ugly. How we paint pictures of people like David, who, yeah, he killed a giant, but most people forget that he was also the author of Netflix and Chill and Kill by sleeping with Bathsheba and killing Uriah. And then also people really forget that he was a deadbeat dad. And he was a horrible father. One of your children rapes another child, and you don't do anything about it. Like,
Yeah.
so we see the good, the bad, the ugly in this Bible. And one of the things that I believe that we're supposed to pick up from that is that no matter what or who we are, God in the constructs of his sovereignty, and at the same time, everything that's filled with the grace that he offers us when we believe, which is belief is black and white. Behavior is a different story, but belief is black and white. Behavior would dictate that then we have this process of sanctification, which is the walking out of the faith over time, us continually doing what we can to try and get it right. We're covered by grace, we're covered by mercy. So if it can be two steps forward, one step back, it's gonna happen. We're human.
Yeah.
But that's what God did with this text. Like, we got wars in the beginning, but you don't have wars in the end, except for the one big
Mhm.
war, but that's the one he's fighting on our behalf. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we have craziness that's happening in the beginning that you don't see as much in the end. And so that's what happens with us too. Like, in the very beginning, we are a raw, unpolished piece. And at the end, hopefully, if we are obedient to the process, we become a masterpiece. And that masterpiece is really hinged upon only two things. And then a third, which is more so the mandate of what we're supposed to do. And of course, the first two is love God, love people. And the last one is make disciples. And so if you're loving God and you're loving people, then you're producing the gospel in your life. And the
Ooh, I like
gospel is,
that. I like
yeah,
that.
and the gospel is attractive. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's one of the things. I am nobody. I am nothing. Like, even on my best day, the Bible says that my righteousness is as filthy rags. And I keep that understanding. It's not to shame me.
No, no, no. I know. I
Yeah,
know.
it's a humility piece. It's to keep me
Yes.
humble.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so when I'm approaching anybody, I don't care who you are. You could be a billionaire, and I had the honor and the privilege of doing this last year. I ran a homeless shelter. You know what I'm saying? It was a big partnership that we did with the nonprofit that I was running. So, I no matter what, if I can look at these people, no matter what they've done, no matter who they are, their misgivings or even their accolades and accomplishments, I'm no respecter of persons on those things because God is no respecter of persons on those things. You can see the face of Jesus in both. It's up to you to be able to do that and to be humble
Mhm.
enough to say, I am here to be a servant of all. And really, that's what my process is servant leadership. It's the same thing that Jesus did. If you ever get a chance, you want to look at it, John chapter 13 is one of my favoriteest things because it is hilarious, actually. It's a bit of a travesty. Is Jesus and the 12 disciples, it's the Last Supper. It's all the good Easter components that some people are fairly familiar with. But if you know the real setup of what happens at that table, called the triclinium, it was like a little U-shaped thing. So it's not even the long table that you see in the
Yeah.
pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so even that's
That
not
was
real.
the
Yeah,
yeah, the U shape was
yeah,
too hard
yeah,
to paint, so
yeah,
they just
yeah.
went,
And for the record, also most angels don't have wings. But
"Ah,
just random stuff, random
all
stuff.
right, let's wrap this up." No, most angels don't have wings. Now you're
Yeah, yeah,
killing me,
yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, some do, but they also have like four faces. So there's that. Messengers, too much. Let's get back on track. But yeah, no. So what happens is, at the table, Jesus begins to disrobe and he puts on a towel, and then he
Mhm.
washes the disciples' feet. And
Yep.
I literally can give you a half-hour discourse on this. I'm not going to do it. But it excites me so much because if you know the main components of the story, which are number one, everybody's feet should have been washed before they sat at the table. That's the commonality of the culture. There's supposed to be a servant or somebody who's supposed to wash their feet upon entering the room. And with nobody doing that, that automatically intimates that one of the 12 should have been the one to be the foot washer. But everybody thinks so high and mighty of themselves that nobody does it. And not only that, but then they spend the entire dinner for the most part arguing about who the greatest in the kingdom is among them. So they're petty, they're horrible, they're ratchet. And Jesus is finally like, okay, I'm better than all of y'all, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna go ahead and wash your feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what he does in the end. He asked them, it's like, do you see what I was just doing right there? He's like, no slave is better than their master. No messenger is better than the one who carries the message. And if you want to be the greatest, then you must first be the least. And it's the most humbling thing to
Yeah.
know that, especially me, who has been placed in a position of Christian leadership, I'm not expecting people to wait hand and foot on me. I can't do it.
Yeah.
It's not biblical. It doesn't make sense. It gets on my last nerves when I see pastors or other individuals who do that. Um, But for me, it sets within me just a simple understanding that when I'm to love God, I love people, and no matter who that person is, it could be the homeless person. They deserve my full undivided attention, and they deserve everything that I have to give. As if I were to give them or give the same thing to a billionaire who might cut me a check for $1 million, which I pray happens. But if it doesn't, so be it. You know, but ultimately that is my common understanding of what this book is.
But yeah, I mean, that's, and you just highlighted for me and brought it to the surface for me that again, the years that I had those religious teachings, just a kid, right? I mean, from
Mhm.
5 to maybe 9 years old, 10 years old, but it stuck because if I'm thinking back, I didn't have any formal leadership lessons. I didn't My dad was like my leadership hero. He didn't give me any lessons. I just watched him and learned by
Right.
his example.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think the way that I've tried to treat people my entire life goes back to those religion teachings.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, here's this guy that's being selfless with everybody, and, it's your childhood mind, but it's like, man, this guy, he's just being good to people. Like, that's how simplistic it was. He's just being good to people. You hear about all these people complaining and some are good, some are bad, some need help. And like this guy's just always there. Like he's like the servant leader,
Mhm.
obviously in my kid language. But now I realize just from this conversation how much that factored into who I am today. You know what I mean? So even though the religion hasn't been for in my mind, like right there this entire time, again, I go back to those shaped a lot of who I was. And that was my first example. My first leadership lesson was exactly as you said, as you were explaining the scene where he decides, listen, I'm going to do it then, and he's their leader, and he's now being the servant. It just calls to mind that that was like my first leadership lesson, formal leadership lesson, hidden. Um, but that's what I took away from that, and that's what I've
Yeah.
tried to, I'm not perfect, but I've tried to serve others, help others. I mean, it seemed like it was the thing to do in my childhood mind.
Yeah, man.
So that's how I've tried to live.
Yeah, no,
So
that's
thank you for
good.
that reminder, because it really does call to mind what that really meant to me.
Of course, of course. And then just to understand, you just said the one thing that everybody says, and I love it. Nobody's perfect. Like if you expect perfection of yourself, then just don't bother being a believer, because you're gonna undergrace yourself more than he will ever overgrace you, and you will end up bowing out in frustration anyway, and you'll somehow manage to blame it on him. Um, that is a common understanding for anybody that I've had that kind of conversation with. And so, I think ultimately that's the reason why I do love the Bible. And again, the good, the bad, the ugly parts, because it shows me that even the greatest, the Davids, the Abrahams, the Moseses, like all of them did something that would be almost cancel culture esque in our current
Yeah,
society today. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Like, or at least in certain environments, like, Noah gets drunk and his younger son tries to rat on him, and then the two older sons cover him because he's a man. He's capable of moral failure, and he never said that he was better than anything. He was just obedient. Or Abraham lies twice about his wife, you know what I'm saying? Because he doesn't want to die, and he knows that thing. And what also happens is, it's funny for me because Abraham is supposed to be the father of the nations and also the father of faith. And if he had the faith and the understanding behind it that he was supposed to have, then he probably would have just said who he was and who she was off the jump. And I bet God still would have protected him. But that's not how it went down. So
There's
it's
just
just it's just so it's funny to see that. But ultimately my main point in that is it's always great for me to witness the imperfections of our perfect Bible, and to know that no matter what I'm doing, I can make the worst mistake of my life. And if I'm humble and repentant and really willing to atone, then I'm always going to be covered by his grace, and everything that happens because of that will be, I mean, it's just a reflective testament or testimony to the goodness of God, that he, instead of striking me dead when I made the last mistake, said, hey, all right, righteous man falls 7 times, he gets up 8. And so I can
Mhm.
fall, and that's an infinite concept there, because
Yeah.
7 is the number of completion. So you can
Yep.
fall as many times as you want to, but as long as you continue to get up and you circumcise your heart, which is really the representation of the number 8 in the Bible. On the 8th day, people were circumcised. And so, for us now, the construct is we don't have to worry about that part. One, because it's really painful the way they did it. And two, because we did it as babies for most of us. But then three, because really Paul talks about the circumcision of the heart. And I can't remember where specifically. That's why I was kind of egging that on for a second, because I see if I can remember. I don't remember.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fine.
but
Hey, you've
but
recalled so much information.
yeah, but he talks about the circumcision of the heart. We need to cut away the fleshy concepts of us, the sinful nature, as it were. And that's a lifetime move. That's a lifetime event. We're not going to do it overnight. We're not going to be in any ways perfect before this lifetime is over. There's always something that we'll have to work on. You'll be 95 years old, and by that time, none of us will have a filter, but it's cool. But we'll always have something to work on. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And so
Oh,
I just love that, because when you really finally have that understanding concerning our God, then the prayer is, hopefully, it, again, like I was saying before, will make you want to press more into him than ever fall away from him. Because the misconception of the Bible is that if you're not being or doing all of the things that the 613 laws say, or all these other things, and even the Pharisees and the misclassified nature of
yeah.
them, then you're pretty much a dead man walking. But I rest on the laurels of the understanding of what I think it was like the rapper Lecrae at one time, or not. No, it was the truth, but I think he got it from somebody too. You know, this thing was not designed to try and make bad people good. It's only designed to make dead people live. And we're
Mm,
all born blind, dead in our sins. And the only way that we find real life, life to the full, John 10:10, or eternal life, which is the construct of everything that is supposed that this Bible is supposed to be about, is to just continue to do what I said before, which is wrestle, which is struggle. And eventually, hopefully, figure out as much of this as we can because it's all going to make sense on the other side. It doesn't need to make sense here. It really doesn't. That's the most unpopular thing I'm going to say today because really, I
mm.
could have just said the entire time because God is God as an answer to any question that you had. But thankfully, he didn't just say because he is him. He did say it. He said it in Exodus chapter 13. But he not only said it, but then he provided an example in his son and a helper in the Holy Spirit to see exactly how we're really supposed to walk it out. And so for that, I'm truly and eternally grateful because I know that no matter what I do, and I'm capable of doing something absolutely dumb at any given point in time, there'll be a baseline of grace and mercy to make sure that I try and get back right to to restore relationship because and I think this will be hopefully my I don't know how much time we have left, but that's uh the compacted understanding of what I know about our Bibles. Our Bible is a Bible of rereads. That's what I
Yeah.
call them, the reread. So it's all about restoration. It's all about reconciliation. It's all about redemption. It's not about retribution, but most people think it is. And if you can
Yeah,
get those three things out of this Bible, I have a funny feeling that you'll have a richer and more satisfying life because you'll know that it ain't about beating you about your head and shoulders. Yeah, sometimes the
and
accountability is needed.
that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's exactly the problem is that a lot of people the people it's almost like the people that not you, obviously, but some of the people that you hear in society that because I don't even hear that many pastors. I'm talking about the people that are caught in the media, and you know how the media can be, but
Yeah.
they're preaching from the Bible, they're preaching from religion, but they're talking about you have to be perfect. You have to be the way God wants you to be, or else there's no redemption, or else, fire and brimstone kind of thing. And I think what people need to hear is exactly what you outlined in the last couple minutes, especially throughout this whole conversation. But I mean, the way you put it in the last couple minutes is amazing because it speaks to leadership, which I'm a junkie for, but it also speaks to this common theme that I find with the more people I coach, the more students I talk to, the more books I read, the more conversations I have like this, the chaos that is life. Because and obviously, I'm not a doctor, I'm not even playing one on TV, but so much of what drives us fucking nuts is that we don't have it nailed down, that we don't have it perfect, that we haven't reached our goal, and that we don't understand that the journey, chaos. I've appreciated chaos. It's grown, especially in the last couple of months and years, but
Right.
that we don't
Right.
need to nail it, that the obstacle, the challenges, the hardships, like that's what we need to look to for the value. But people don't collect their value until they've reached some kind of finality, finish
Mhm.
line, goal. So I
Okay.
love the fact that you put it that this doesn't expect you to be perfect. You can wrestle with this. It's not tied up perfectly. You'll see the good, the bad, the ugly. And this is like, one of the holiest of books, and it's all in there. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that you laid it out like that because I think a lot of people can find value, especially in that component. Because I think, like you said, they may have that opinion that perception that it's calling for them to be perfect, that it's or else,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that.
so I appreciate that so much, Jordan.
That's cool. And if you'll allow me,
Sure.
yeah, I think the capstone of this conversation, based off what you just said, will make perfect sense concerning the Bible and leadership. First and foremost, God honors struggle. If I'm correct, it's Psalm 37, 24, 25, or 25, 26. Right there is one of the things that illuminated that for me. And of course, you see it in the Bible. There's a lot of struggling. People do a lot of struggling, and then they're still honored in the end, especially in Hebrews chapter 11, which is the capstone moment. So certainty, finality, all of that stuff. We don't get that privilege. Let me say it that way. So Hebrews 11:1 says this, and it's concerning the understanding of faith itself, not the faith, but faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And I was just having a conversation about this with a friend on the phone before this, and so it's relatively fresh in my mind. So let me, that's Paul. Let me flash back to Jesus in John chapter 16, verse 33. So in John chapter 16, Jesus is laying out how all of these things are about to happen to the disciples and to anybody who believes. And basically, it's all about what's that word, them needing to persevere, but what's the p word that I'm looking for? It doesn't matter. They're about to get messed with. That's the bottom line. And so he's saying all these things are getting ready to happen. Just get ready. People are not going to like you because you believe in me. But then he says in verse 33, I've told you all these things so that you may have peace in me. In this world, you will endure many trials and face many sorrows, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. So now this is a prophetic statement because Jesus made that statement, what, over 2,000 years ago, right? Um, but if you take a look at the world right now, it doesn't look overcome, does it? At all. And so there, when I tie that into the understanding of Hebrews 11, verse 1, substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen, it means that what he said was right. We just haven't seen it yet. And we just have to continue to trust in that. Thus, making the declaration, when you are a firm believer in the faith, you officially have abandoned your place in keeping certainty in anything because we don't know what he's going to do because he's a good God and he promises that these things are going to happen. He just didn't tell you how, he didn't tell you when, he didn't tell you fully what was expected of you except to do the two things, to love God and to love people, and then ultimately to make disciples. So this is what hopefully I would say produces a peace for people, because even though all the turmoil of the world is happening, I can sleep peacefully at night because Jesus told me 2,000 years ago that he already got it and that everything's going to be good. And if we could operate in that sense of faith, and faith casting out the anxiety connected to uncertainty, then I think we would all be in a much better place. And that just takes the practice of prayer and getting in the word and fully beginning to understand the Bible and everything that's attached to it. So hopefully that's an encouragement. I know, because it doesn't really sound like it, but I can tell you that if there's anything that I have gotten out of the Bible is a common sense of real peace, even though I know that, as a person of color, sometimes my skin will not protect me, just all of the crazy things that are happening in the world right now, or that I could have easily gotten this disease that has taken out millions of people on this globe, but for some reason I haven't. All of those things. I just think about the many blessings that I have instead. And that produces within me a thankfulness. I can't be bitter. I can't be sad. I can't be angry, because my thankfulness will not allow me to do that, because I know that I should have been dead. But because a man, and in the form of man, God loved me so much that he went ahead and took care of my sins so that I could live this life. I have no choice but to be grateful, and be grateful until the very end of this one and the beginning of the next one in eternity.
Perfect. Well, work in progress, but it sounds great for now, man.
A little bit.
One question I had was, so how did your dad react to you following in the footsteps? What was that conversation like?
Yeah, he yelled at me. No, I'm just kidding. Nah, my father's been praying for this for quite some time, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I think he saw it on me when I was younger. I think that he knew that I was destined for it in some way, shape, form, or fashion. He had heartburn about the process because of how churches work these days. He thought that I was really just going to be left an outcast. And in a sense, to be honest with you, I was loved, but I was not really put into perfect positions. And that's also another testament to the understanding of God and
Yeah.
timing, because most of us would like to operate on chronological time, but the Bible is something that expresses more of what they will call appointed due season. So there's chronos in the Greek, which is chronology, and then there's
Mhm.
kairos, which is the appointed due season. And I'm gonna tell you right now, the last 10 to 12 years of my life, the first 10 years were a real slow burn. and there was a lot of tarrying and just hoping and being real patient. And then the last 2 years have been a nothing short of a catapult, and I'm really grateful for it. But I know a lot of that is on the front end, a covering of sorts from people like my dad, who prayed and knew that the time would come. We just all really needed to be patient, and that everything was going to be all right,
That's
and
what
it
we
should
don't
for us.
have. We don't have patience.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
especially in today's society when you have instant gratification of like stuff like this, the internet and social media, everything is at your fingertips. So we're getting further and further away from that life that required you to be patient until you come across lessons like that where you got to wait for so long. But
Hmm.
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man.
And Jordan, before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to share, mention? Anything you're up to or
You know, as a pastor, I'd be a complete jackass if I didn't just take the opportunity to make the appeal to anybody who's listening that doesn't believe. Hopefully this conversation has been a testament to what faith can be like. It's not always like this. And to be honest with you, sometimes faith is boring. Sometimes faith is really tough. Paul even said once, I think in Second Corinthians chapter 1, 8 and 9, that he and his people were perplexed beyond anything they could bear. As a matter of fact, they expected to die. And as sure as I hit my little pop filter, sorry.
no
Um,
worries?
but uh, but yeah, just sometimes life is still going to be like that, even as a believer. It's not sunshine and lollipops. But I want to make the appeal to any of you. If you don't believe, ask yourself why. And then really, if you have questions, shoot, don't hesitate. Just shoot me an email. And I think that'll be in the show notes or something like that.
Yep. Yep.
But I just love having conversations about this because I believe that all of us are his creation, and he wants to have a restored relationship with all of us. And so it would be foolish of me to not make that appeal to anybody because I'm sorry, I know our world is crazy, but our God is good. And he will always be good. And so I just want people to trust in that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I got to say. And
Awesome,
also,
man.
I'm praying for anybody who has a busted bracket in the NCAA tournament right now.
I think that may have happened in the first, what, half day, half couple hours of the tournament itself.
Yeah, yeah. You know what's funny? I'd make a gospel joke about it, but I'm gonna leave it alone. So I actually put down Duke to win it all. I can't stand Duke. But I did put them down to win it all for a variety of reasons. I have a little brother of mine that plays for them, Mark Williams, number 15. I say little, but the kid is monstrous. And then it's Coach K's last dance. And I don't care what
Yeah,
you think
yeah.
about Duke. I really have a huge appreciation for Coach K. He's a great man, believing Catholic. And also he's a tremendous husband and father to his kids. And to be able to be in that capacity and still do that, that's a testament to somebody who really walks out what I'd say is true biblical principle.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't followed his career a lot. Obviously, I've known of him for decades, but I
Mhm.
mean, you can tell the guy's respected. And when it was announced that they would be his last season, just the people that came out, um, I don't know, when people vouch for you from all walks of whether it's sports or not, you know you've made an impact. So,
Exactly. But yeah,
Jordan, thank you so much for sitting down with me, man. This was great. I learned a lot. I view the Bible differently now. I am gonna read it myself. Um, just based on this conversation, it's one of those things I think we all have a responsibility where even if somebody says something is one thing, you have a responsibility for yourself to go and see what it's all about, to read about it, to listen to it, to have a conversation with whoever the person might be, if it is a person. But I appreciate the way that you've outlined the beauty of the book and what you've taken away from it.
yeah. Thank you, my man. I appreciate that, friend. And thank you for creating this space to be able to have these conversations because they are
Absolutely.
definitely necessary now more than ever.
I completely agree 1,000%. So for anybody watching and listening, if there's anything I might have missed, there's a lot to cover, so little time. But if there's something that you're curious about that I didn't touch base with Jordan on or ask him about, as he said, yeah, you could reach out to him or you can reach out to me, and I'll make sure he gets the message. He just has such a wealth of knowledge that there's just so much more to learn from him. But In the meantime, thank you for watching, listening. Jordan, best of luck, and we'll be in touch, man. Take care,
Indeed.
buddy.
Likewise,
Bye.
brother. All right.